Hey there, welcome to Signal Hill, St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. I've never been to Newfoundland, but I would love to visit someday. I don't remember when I first heard of Signal Hill. I always had it stuck in my mind that it was the place where Marconi sent the first radio transmission across the Atlantic. One thing that always struck me was how castle-like it looks. It's so different from the colorful buildings one associates with Newfoundland. Here we see that on December 12, 1901, Marconi received a message at Signal Hill. Here's a photo of Marconi. The caption reads, "Marconi watching associates raise kite antenna at Signal Hill in December 1901. But it looks to me like he's not just watching, but he's holding a line or cable. You can see it if you look closely enough. I was always under the impression that Marconi and some other forward-thinking entrepreneurs were the ones who built the tower because they wanted to develop the new wireless radio technology, but it wasn't. According to this entry, begun in 1898 to commemorate both Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee and the 400th anniversary of John Cabot's voyage to the New World, Cabot Tower was completed in 1900. Wait a minute. It was begun in 1898 and completed in 1900? In 2 years? I also found this entry, which says that the tower was built between 1897 and 1900. The cornerstone was laid on June 14, 1897. However, full construction did not commence until August 1898. So the work started more than a year later, and the tower was completed in 1900. Really? In Newfoundland, the snow flies from October to May, so you've got 6 months a year to build if you're lucky. Given the snow, Signal Hill was actually built in 12 months. No heavy equipment, no excavators, no power tools, lugging rocks uphill with horse and wagon. I tried to find construction photos or pictures of the official opening, but found nothing. This to me is surprising because building something as significant as this would be a really big deal. But this is the only picture I found. I also found it weird that they would combine both of these commemorations. I don't think a monarchist back in Victorian times would go for the idea of the Queen sharing her Jubilee with a commoner. Putting them both together was like giving Cabot the same importance as the Queen. I tried to find more information on this and found this old newspaper article. Turns out my concerns about royal protocol were wrong, and they did combine Queen Victoria and Cabot's commemorations. Here's one entry. The societies formed into one grand procession near the British Hall and marched down Military Road and up Signal Hill, followed by a vast concourse of citizens. A platform had been erected on the site of the proposed tower, and the chief dignitaries of church and state had assembled thereon, while strings of flags of all nations and colors floated gracefully in the breeze overhead. There's pages of this stuff. I won't read all of it here, it's way too long. With all this newspaper coverage, I thought I would come across tons of images of the Jubilee celebrations. You know, stuff like this. But I didn't find anything. Again, just this picture. Okay, so you've got what looks like the red ensign, which is a sort of informal flag that would be used by British colonies. Remember, Newfoundland did not join Canada until 1949, and the Canadian flag came even later. This flag looks like Nova Scotia, or maybe it's a ship's flag. This is the British Royal Standard for Queen Victoria, but there's nothing close to that in the photo, at least not what I can see. This is the family crest for Cabot, which is also not there, and I couldn't find anything for his ship. These two flags look like international code flags. If I'm not mistaken, the closer one with a square is the letter P, and the one with the diamond is an F. I have no idea what they would mean in this context. Also, did you notice there's no women or children? There's no archbishop or society people like the newspaper describes. I don't know what or where this was, but I doubt very much this photo was taken on Signal Hill during the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. But they did lay a cornerstone on Signal Hill. You can see the end of the paragraph above, and then they go on to talk about Cabot's arrival. He reviewed the history of our country back to a morning in June 1497 when the morning mist rolled away and brave John Cabot in the Little Matthew saw the fir-crowned summits of Signal Hill. What's interesting is that nobody really knows precisely where Cabot landed. Some believe he landed in Cape Bonavista. Here's one memorial to him in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Now to me, a bust with a flagpole seems a much more reasonable tribute, not something as extravagant as a tower. I did discover that the tower on Signal Hill did play a role though. If we go back to that paragraph, there was a mast at the highest point on the hill, and it would be the job of the signalman to keep an eye out for ships approaching the city. When one was spotted, he would indicate by flag what type of ship it was, what country it was from, and fire off a cannon so that the men below in the town would know to look towards the hill. By the end of the 18th century, a blockhouse had been constructed on the site. Cabot Tower was the last in a line of signaling blockhouses built on Signal Hill. So if that's the case, why not say so from the get-go? Why all the emphasis on presenting the tower as a commemorative structure? Maybe it's just semantics. Maybe they thought differently back then, but it seems lopsided to me. And if you're going to build a signaling tower, why so elaborate? I mean, this was the end of the 1800s. They could see that radio transmissions were coming into their own and were slowly replacing flags. Why build something so over the top that looks like a relic from the past? Why? It's just too much. Don't get me wrong, the stonework is beautiful. I still can't get over it that it was built in 2 years. Ask anyone in construction, that octagon tower would be a nightmare. And the protruding stones across the top, that takes some serious masonry. This in a city of 30,000 where 40% of the men are working in the fishery. And the buttress at the back, I think it's called a buttress, that's no easy feat. And why would you build something that needs a staircase to get in? Why not an entrance at ground level? Why add all the extra material, labors, planning, difficulty? I don't get it. I did, however, discover that there was some resistance to the tower. Let's have a look. Although now one of the most recognizable symbols of St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador, its construction was not well supported in the town. Most of St. John's burned to the ground in 1892. Another project, the Victoria Wing of the local hospital, received much more public support. So there was a fire, and it wasn't the first. The fire was massive and razed most of the city, including the general hospital. What I found out was the stone from the hospital was actually salvaged and reused to build Cabot Tower. Yep, they gathered up all that rock, cleaned it, reworked it, got all the edges and angles right, lugged them all to the top of Signal Hill, and put them back together as this gorgeous building. Now here's an image of how bad that fire was. Look at this. The city's in ruins. 11,000 of the city's 30,000 people were homeless. No wonder the citizens thought that a new hospital wing was more important than a tower. But I guess they figured recycling the sandstone was a great way to keep down costs and appease the public. So the people did get their new hospital wing. The newspaper article describes how the cornerstone was put into place on the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. I wanted to know more about the Victoria Wing, so I continued digging. And I came across this article. And what I realized was, going through all these different articles, a lot of them were referencing the Victoria Wing, but they weren't using the name, the Victoria Wing. So it was all kind of confusing. But here, I found a reference to the laying of the cornerstone. The cornerstone was laid on June 24th, 1897, and opened in August of 1898. So all this was built within a year. Again, I did look, but I couldn't find any construction photos or any pictures of an official opening ceremony for any of this. But here's another image I came across in my travels. The Battle of Signal Hill in 1762. I find the castles interesting, or maybe they're fortifications, but maybe adding in these buildings its artistic license, and if that's the case, tells me we can't count on any of these historic illustrations to really accurately represent what was happening in the past. Maybe those buildings are supposed to be the city of St. John's as it appeared in 1762. I mean, they're in the right place. Could those tall turrets be the basilica that was built in the mid-1800s but survived the Great Fire of 1892? I don't know. Here's another illustration from 1841. Is that the signaling blockhouse that was there before Cabot Tower? If so, that wooden structure was ginormous and would have been absolutely shredded by the wind. This one's from 1880. And here's the view today. Now this is interesting. This is in 1901, and that's definitely Cabot Tower in the background. The silhouette looks so much like what we see in those early illustrations we just looked at. Actually, I messaged the person who posted this on Facebook to ask for permission to use it, but I never heard back. Seems they add color to old images, and they do, looking at this, they do a really, really good job. Here's another look at the Great Fire of 1892 for comparison. And another quick look at this one. If this is 1901, it's 9 years after the fire, and the city of St. John's has recovered really well. Here's another photo of St. John's, less than 10 years after the fire. Look how built out everything is. Not a trace that there was ever a lick of flame anywhere. Actually, come to think of it, the city looks deserted. There's only one boat and not a soul in sight. I don't know what to make of this. There's just so much here that doesn't add up, at least not for me. Anyway, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not telling anyone what to think. I could be completely wrong about all of this. Then again, I may be right. Now this is interesting.